Hi, and welcome to the Three Lenses module. In here, we're going to look at a way to analyze organizations, and that's going to help us with the ability to design a better organization or to recommend changes to an organization. So if you see this PowerPoint on your screen, you can see we're going to talk about the three lens models, we call it, in analyzing organizations. And there's a reading handout associated with this. So when we look at an organization, we think that through the ideas of schemas, right? Schemas are sort of preconceived notions on how we view the world, right? Schemas are a good thing because we save a lot of time. We don't have to analyze every situation from the start. When we go at the grocery store, we know it's busy with lots of people there doing lots of things, but that's okay. They don't concern us. It's just us searching for the food items we need, and then we go to check out, and then we have to interact with others. For instance, we don't have to figure that out. As opposed to someone with their first time in a grocery store might wonder what the heck is going on with all these activities. Right, so this is a good thing. It helps us in life all the time. It helps us function as better humans. And you see the third bullet here. The problem is these assumptions can sometimes be incorrect, and they can lead us to make mistakes. Right? We can have errors. Imagine you just take a look at somebody, and I don't know, you see a genius physics person, and it's their day off, and they're not exactly dressed like a high-end researcher, and you might mistake them for somebody in a different walk of life. Right, so what we can do is we can test our assumptions with these three different focused lenses, so we can purposely size up a situation from these three different points of views, and that is liable to get us to take a more comprehensive look at what's going on than we would just using our general schemas. Right, so we're going to use these three lenses. So think about some examples of organizations and how they could be understood in multiple ways. Right, there's what it is the organization's trying to do, what it is they're saying doing, what they say they're doing, what it is that's the workers might say that goes on inside that organization, and how all these things are happening inside the organization and how that affects their results in striving to achieve their goals. So in this case, the three lenses we're going to look at is the strategic lens, the political lens, and the cultural lens, and I'll break each of those down as an individual element for you. Right, and we need to think of an organization, right? It's this big amorphous thing, right? It's not just a company or an organization trying to do stuff. It is an organization, so it's like a big machine, but it's like an organism. It's alive, it's organic, it has different parts moving around. There's a community, there's interaction between the various parts of the organization. There's probably a distributed intelligence where certain parts of the organization know things more or less than other parts of the organization. It might even be a battlefield where there's different parts of the organization having internal competitions for different things. So the first of the lens we're going to look at here is the strategic lens, right? And when you think of the strategic lens, think of how the organization is formally designed. So an organization's chart, right? Who are the managers? What are their departments? Are there workers? How is it designed? Right? What are the goals, right? What is the value proposition of this organization, or what is the organization designed to do as we lay out these reporting structures, these linkages, and so forth through the organization, right? Generally, when we think of organizational design, that's what many people think of, right? So that is the strategic lens will show us that, right? And we think of grouping, like by departments or by divisions, things like that. We think of the linking, how these things interface with each other. So I have down here a bullet, right? The functional departments versus a divisional structure versus a market structure, right? So for instance, some organization designed by, has a different organization for South America than North America, and as opposed to Europe and the Far East and so forth, right? Linking, the linking referred to is how do the different parts of the organization communicate with each other, right? How does that work? Who's in charge? Who controls the flow of the information? Who makes sure it happens? And who can restrict it? Sometimes information is power, right? And alignment, right? Do the individuals have resources and motivation to carry out their goals efficiently and effectively, right? So the organization itself is using these different things we're learning in our textbook about management and how you design organizations and so forth, right? And then they're trying to figure out how they're going to use those things to meet the organizational goals, right? So this is quite a bit of what we think of when we think of traditional strategic design. Right, so some key concepts we want to look at here, right? What are the goals? How do we define goals? What are the tasks? What is the information flow, right? And what does a leader need to do to be successful? They need to be a strategist. They need to be an architect, right? They need to very clearly understand how the organization works, right? And what are the drivers for change? When do we know we got to change the strategic design? Often it's something external in the environment. tells us it's not working, or there's just an internal lack of environment. So as I like to say, not everybody's rowing the boat in the same direction. Something is happening where we're all not pulling in the same direction, and we need to get involved with the organization and change that. So we see here, often we assess our environment, we assess our organization, we decide what it is we're trying to do, and then we make the necessary changes. Is sort of the crux of this slide. Right, so we're going to look on the outside, we're going to look on the inside, and then we're going to say, okay, what do we want to do? And then we figure it out. Right. The question is just redesigning the organization enough? Right. Does that automatically mean everybody has a new way of working, everybody knows what to do, and more importantly, everybody's willing to do it? Right. So is this enough, right? Right. So the basic idea is to get people with the right knowledge and give them appropriate tasks and sufficient information to accomplish the goals. If you've ever read the book, The 1 Minute Manager, that's kind of the point of that book, right? Does a person know what they're supposed to do, and do they have the tools to make that happen? Right. But how do you know that a person has the right knowledge? How do you know they have the ability to learn or create if you haven't done that kind of thing before? Right. Right. Who decides if they have sufficient information? Right. And just because there's organizational goals, what are my goals? So why should I care? And who's in charge? Right. Are they in charge because the organization set in charge? When we all know that there's other people who have influence in the organization that really aren't very high up in the organizational chart. And so that takes us to the political lens. Right. So from a political lens, we think about who's defining the problem and what gives them the power to define it. Right. So it's more like we think about the politics in the office, right? But we spend a lot more time thinking about the political lens than we do the strategic lens. And I suppose that's because we think of the strategic lens as being somewhat fixed. And as we all know, the political lens changes often, continuously, rapidly, and so forth. Right. And so the political lens views an organization not as a structure to achieve goals, but organizations are contests for power and autonomy among internal stakeholders. So you better believe there's internal competition for resources and so forth with the political lens. Right. So it takes more than laying out an org chart on paper. We have to understand the motivating things and of these internal stakeholders and their quest for power and what it is they're trying to do for themselves inside the organization. Right. So we can use a strategic designs to achieve goals, but that's not enough, right? The organizational behaviors are grounded in political and self-interest. So to get people to follow the strategic design, often we've got to pull in the political lens and take a look at what drives the parts of the organization to get the behaviors that we want, right? Often it's been my experience, this is a big frustration of managers. Hey, I lay out an org chart, and if everybody did what they were supposed to do, things would be a lot better around here. Yeah, but they don't, right? So why don't they, right? Often you can find the answer by looking with the political lens. Right, so some of the key processes we need to think about in a political lens, right? We have conflict and conflict resolution, right? Often by negotiation, right? And we have skills that have to happen like coalition building. So leaders think they can just make a decree and it's going to happen. With a political lens, you see that's not necessarily so. I can't force people with a former structure as much as I got to get buy-in. I've got to negotiate with people, right? I've got to work with people and figure out what it is I can do to get them to agree and to get them to be motivated. Right? So some of the key concepts here are power and influence, and often I think of like leaders exert influence others, and power is how they do that. So how can you get people to listen to you? And often it's not formal power, it's informal power. And we talked about that in the leadership module, or we will actually in the leadership module. How networks are connected and how people work with each other and how information is passed around, how much autonomy is there, what are individual interests and organizational interests, and these coalitions that are popping up around us. So leaders often have to build an interest map, at least in their head, of who wants what, right? So I know what to offer people so I get them to do stuff, right? I can't just tell people to do stuff, I have to get buy-in. Right? And as I get buy-in from the different groups, I start building this coalition to do this thing I want to do, whatever it is. And I might have to build a network, particularly an informal network of others who will have buy-in to this goal and do this. And I'm probably going to need negotiation skills to make all that happen. So this is a very different look at life as opposed to the strategic structure, strategic design, which has just this is the org chart, everybody do what you're told, and off we go, right? That may work in the military. It actually doesn't work in the military very well, right? Where they have ultimate force over people, even that doesn't work. When you use a political lens, right, the organization functions much more effectively. Right? So what are some of the drivers of change? When the political lens is changing and there's shifts in power of the stakeholders. So other people get to lead, other people get to call the shots, other people get to exert influence, right? So things are shifting, and things can do that. There's no official announcement. It's all informal. That's why the political lens takes a lot of people's time, because they always have to keep an eye out and an ear out of what's going on around them. They have to check with their informal network and see what's happening as they try to gauge what's going on, because this is clearly the part of the organization that's not written down. Often it's happening basically underwater, and you got to figure out what's going on, because it affects everybody's ability to function, especially the leaders and the managers. Right, so we had the structural design, we had the strategic design, we had the political lens. Right now we have the cultural lens. Right, so every organization has its own organizational culture. Right, and this is what people must learn to become fully accepted and functioning members of an organization. They have to learn how to act like they belong in that organization. So one of the quick definitions I like for organizational culture, it's the personality of an organization. Right? Is it aggressive and we always try hard? Is it we never let our customers down? Is it, hey, people work here, we don't care, the organization doesn't look after us, so we don't look after it, right? Whatever that organizational culture might have to be. Right? So inside this organization, we find that they share mental maps, right? They share assumptions. This is the way it works around here. People quickly learn this from their colleagues and others, right? This is the way things work around here. This is the way we behave. And this isn't just businesses, but this is, for instance, at my college, at other organizations I belong to, right? This quickly, you see the newcomers quickly assimilating into the organization, or they don't, in which case they're either standing off alone, which they're less effective in the organization, or they just don't buy in at all, and at the first opportunity, right, they depart from the organization. Right, some of the key processes we think about this are meaning interpretation, how the cultural lens adds context to the things around us, right? What's taken for granted? What do we expect? What do we think we know about the organization and how people should behave in it? Right, and an interesting key concept of your cultural lens is the artifacts, right? Artifacts are the things that display what we value around here. Could be awards, could be public displays of accolades, things like that. The symbols that we use in our organization. So the symbols might be again, what gets credit, or even who gets the good offices and so forth. Myths and values in the organization, that's sometimes referred to as tribal knowledge. Those are the stories that get passed down from worker to worker, or even generation to generation, about this is when this guy did this thing around here and it's not tolerated at all, and well, he's not here anymore. Or this is how you become a hero around here. This guy broke a little rule, but he saved the day and now he's a hero. Or even though he did save the day, he's not a hero, he's a goat and he's not here anymore. Right? So it can be, so it tells people what's expected of them, what gets rewarded, right? How they're supposed to behave, and it gives an identity to the organization, how people fit into it. Keeping in mind there are subcultures within an organization that may or may not act like the organization as a whole. For instance, upper management may have its own subculture where they might expect one culture from the organization, but they might expect something different from themselves. Right, so it's fun to kind of interesting to think about, what are the artifacts at your workplace? How do you signify the culture to new people, right? To customers, to suppliers, to particularly the new hires as you bring them into your own organizational culture. And so in this cultural lens, the leaders, we have the symbol of the leaders, often the symbol of the culture, right? They set the culture. If they speak a certain way, if they use certain words or don't use certain words, how they react to stress, how they behave in public, how they behave in private, all that becomes sort of the shaper of the culture of an organization. Right, and then what might be a driver to change? Challenges the basic assumptions. So that isn't working, or we don't do it that way anymore, or we thought that would be okay and now it's not, right? So generally it's something pretty significant has to happen to change a culture of an organization, because they're in fact learned behaviors. And as anybody tried to quit a habit, smoking or whatever it might be, right, will tell you learned behaviors are difficult to shake, right? Because we do them so much, right? So it becomes difficult to unlearn. Right. So in diagnosing an organizational culture, right, think about the symbols and the meanings of those symbols to the organization, right? Think about what gives the organization identity. Social control. How do we control the workers? How do we control the members of the organization? Anybody from a small town knows how that works, right? There's this social pressure to behave a certain way, right? And there's certainly subcultures I mentioned, so there's different pockets of different type of culture and organization, and all this cultural relativity affects around the world around us and how we interpret the world around us, right? And we go back to our habits and our history. This is what we're used to. This is how it's been a long time. This is how we think of things around here, right? So we get to the big so what, right? I always ask so what, right? So how do we use these three lenses, right? So the exercise is going to be in here to use these three lenses to diagnose an organization. I'm going to give you a case study, and you're going to use each individual lens to do it, right? So think about if you were the leader of a team, how would you use these three different lenses to diagnose what's going on? Or if you're a leader of change in an organization, how you were doing this, right? And my strong advice is you use these three lenses to analyze your own organization, not just what's the structure of the organization and want you to do, but I think very much about the culture, right, and the politics of the office. And politics isn't necessarily a dirty word, but how you can use those, right, to get the most out of your organization for yourself, right? And that's why this little line at the end says, why do consultants get paid so much, right? Because the smart people working inside that organization can be pretty dumb because they sort of get blind to what's going on around them. They don't back up. They may only see the org chart and they think that's the way things are going to work. And matter of fact, it's not just veterans people, could be new people too, but often it's the consultants will come in and look at things from the outside. They can figure out what's going on using different tools, including these three lenses, and they can figure this out, right? So in this project that we're going to do for homework, right, so we think about what are the goals of the project and how do we analyze an organization. So I want you to look through each of the three lenses individually, right, and see what's going on. And then I want you to put all three together and diagnose what's going on in this organization, and then have some recommendations for what the organization might do, right? So the key thing is we don't have just one way to look at an organization. We look at its formal structure, its strategies, all of that together, right? But then we look at the the politics of what's going on, what motivates individual people, the conflicts as individuals strive to move up, as their motivations and so forth. And then we're going to look at this cultural context on which everything happens, right? Whether in the US or the cultural context is you're in a country with a completely different culture, say Japan or the Middle East or someplace like that. All of this would be taken differently, not just because of the national culture, but because of the organizational culture itself. All right, so I'll see the homework assignment, which will explain more in detail what I'm expecting on this project. But there's a look at the three lenses, which will give you three distinct ways to view an organization and how it might be analyzed. Thank you.